Okay, well, it looks like I'm in the right place now, but I don't know if it's happening on AstroLive. Yes, but I'm not on the right YouTube. Okay, well, it looks like I'm in the right place now, but I don't know if it's happening on AstroLive. Yes, but I'm not on the right YouTube. Okay, well, it looks like I'm in the right place now, but I don't know if it's happening on AstroLive. Okay, where are we? Where's this thing? Where is Chatlandia? And I can't find Chatlandia. It's not even on Chrome. Okay. Oh God. All right. So yeah, I'm over on YouTube. You'll find me. You will find me. I know you'll find me. I have confidence in you. I have confidence in all of you. There I am. Yep. Good. Okay. So let me put this over on Twitter. Let's do a little Twitter action. Let's do a little Facebook action. And let's do that. Okay. We'll let Facebook know. That should be helpful for some people. And give me 1 second. We'll get into this thing. All right. There we go. A little link. A little linky dinky there. All right. It's posting. We are on. Like Donkey Kong or something like that. Let me get on over there. All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for your patience. And thanks for being here. Let's see. Who do we have? Liz Atwell back again. What's going on, Liz? There she is. The lovely and talented Joni S. Susie Gemini in the house. April Himmel. Roxana. What's going on, Roxana? W.C. Ray. Is it soup yet? Almost. Howdy again, Sony. Whimsical Farm Girl. Yeah, we had a, you know, it was a good Thanksgiving. I got to spend it with my kid, which was it was interesting. I went to the Raiders game. Well, it was actually the Cowboys game, and they were playing the Raiders, and so I grew up as a Raider fan until I went to L.A. I was betrayed by Al Davis. My football father, Al Davis, betrayed me. Moved the team to Los Angeles, and I found a new football father, and that was Bill Walsh. We're going to be talking about fathers tonight, so I'm putting this into context. My voice is still a little rough from the weekend. And so I became a 49er fan because they were really cool and interesting. Bill Walsh was a brilliant guy, but I was a big Raider fan as a kid because they were like cartoon characters. So my kid decided that he wanted to be a Raider fan. He was done with the Niners. They lost the Super Bowl, and I'm like, I'm done with those losers. I really think the Super Bowl was traumatic for him. So I said, fuck that. I'm going to go with the Raiders. So he's a Raider fan. And, I didn't know how many more Raider games or football games we'd be able to see because the future is uncertain. That much we can be certain about. So I decided, why don't we I looked around actually. I wanted to find out if the Raiders were actually playing in Texas this year. And lo and behold, they were. It was on Thanksgiving Day. So I bought tickets. They weren't cheap, let me tell you. And we drove up on Wednesday, or Thursday rather, Thanksgiving Day. And it was a trip. It was a total trip. The Raider fans they're wild. Cowboy fans had all they could handle with Raider fans on Thursday. And the Raider fans they're colorful. They are colorful. They're not like Eagle fans are colorful, but in a different kind of way. Their language is colorful, but the Raiders tend to dress out. They have face paint. They're like, kind of like got a little bit of a Clint Eastwood look. They'll wear ponchos, silver and black. I mean, they're an interesting group, and I would say that they trend heavily towards Black and Hispanic, and then you've got a few white dudes who probably like I don't know. White nationalists. No, they're not white nationalists. They're Raider fans. It's one big family. So, but it was great. It was totally great. The Raider fans were there. They were representing probably about 45% Raider fans in Jerry World AT&T Stadium. And I'd never been to that stadium before, and it was a mind blower, man. It was so huge. It was larger than life. I mean, really a larger than life sporting complex. Yeah, we had nosebleed seats, and they were still significant. But even with the nosebleed seats there, they have this enormous TV screen. I mean, it's the biggest fucking TV screen I've ever seen. And you can look down at the field of play, and you can watch the players play. But I'd say 80% of the time, I was watching the damn TV screen because it was all real time. There was no latency. There was no lag time. And my kid and I have this uncanny streak that every game we've been to that involves either the Oakland A's, the Oakland Raiders, or with a much more limited sample size, the Golden State Warriors, they win. We've been to like 13 A's games. They haven't lost a single game. That includes, I think, 3 in Texas, 2 in Houston, 1 in Arlington. And the Raiders had been, I think they lost 3 in a row or something. So, but I just had a feeling they were going to win, and they did. It was in overtime. It was a good day. It was a really good day. And again, I mean, it was just like so American and so excessive, but American and excessive in a way that, I don't know, you can be strangely proud of. It's like, where else is that going to happen? Not too many other places. I think Los Angeles has a really big stadium and a big screen. I think their screen might rival Jerry's screen. So it was good. It was definitely good. Although my kid got a little sick, but that's another story. Thank you. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had memorable times. because we need memorable times. We need memorable times. We need to bring those memorable times into our cellular body, into our DNA. We need those memorable times to really bond with us. It's important. And when I say memorable, I didn't necessarily mean good. You know, good and memorable obviously is optimal, but sometimes memorable, even if it's not good, can be very important. So that's why I said I wish everybody had a memorable time. And they didn't waste any time at all dropping the new Greek on us. We'll talk a little bit about that, but because I'm here on YouTube, I have to use a little word magic at times, if you know what I'm saying. Last week I got hit with a copyright claim on the. I wanted to play Holst again this week. I wanted to play Saturn because we played Jupiter last week. You can see we've got Saturn and Jupiter here in the background. But I got hit with a copyright from I think it was the London Philharmonic. I think it might have been the London Philharmonic. I got a bit of an issue with it, and let me tell you why. So there's this thing called eminent domain, right? It's like it's not eminent domain. It's a what is it? It's a public domain. Eminent domain is something different. I have an issue with that too. Public domain. So there are pieces of work that, after a period of time, move into public domain territory. Like if you wanted to print a Bible and sell Bibles, you could, because it's in public domain. If you wanted to print the works of Shakespeare, selected works of Shakespeare, you could do that. Nobody owns the selected works of Shakespeare. They're in the public domain. Same with the Bible. So when it gets into music, it gets a little more complicated, but there are rules for public domain and music. And the general rule is that 70 years after the person's death, their work moves into public domain. So I looked up Gustav Holst, and he passed away in 1934. So again, technically speaking, 2014 should have been A-OK for public domain with the planets. Now, here's where they try to trick you. They can claim that there is an arrangement that was specific to the London Philharmonic, in which case they can claim a copyright. Now, I don't know how they would do it. It's all scored out with sheet music. Maybe, I don't know, they add an extra oboe or an extra timpani, or whoever the conductor was, held notes for, half a second longer in certain passages. I mean, theoretically, I guess you can make a case for that. But let's be real, Holst is dead. His family is dead. Unless it got passed into some kind of a trust, and I don't have the legal chain of, what do you call it? Chain of custody. I don't have the legal chain of custody in front of me for the Holst family, but technically speaking, that piece should be in public domain. Now, there are versions of it on Wiki Commons. I was actually trying to get one to play tonight. So there are actual public versions of Holst's planets, but I couldn't get it to work. Anyway, tonight was going to be Saturn. We're going to talk about Saturn tonight. We're going to talk about Saturn in the context of fathers. And we're going to talk about Saturn in the context of power and authority, and why it's important, right? Why discussion around Saturn, why discussion around fathers, why discussion around power and authority is really important. And we're we're going to look at two individuals tonight. We're going to look at Robert Bly. I played a clip of Bly earlier in the week, and it really shook me in a good way. And it reminded me of how profound Bly was. And I remember there were times where I really liked him. Like I followed him through the whole men's work. But there were there every now and then he would get this kind of goofy look about him. And I would say to myself, yeah, Bly's a little fruity. But then he would back off of that and really hit you right square between the eyes. And he's this really interesting combination of this Saturnian figure who is moved by desire and poetry. He's really interesting in that way. So I found a interview with him with Bill Moyers. I'm going to play a couple of clips because of some of the things that he talks about that I think are really germane to our time. And I'm also going to play at least one clip of Jordan Peterson. Now, I'm going to bring astrology into this because we're going to look at their charts. And we're also going to look at their human design charts tonight because they're really interesting. Like, it's like one of those windows into human design where you go, you know what? There's a there. Like, there's a total there. You look at it and go, yep. You don't have to know much about it. Like, I could walk you through just some really high level touch points and you'll go, yep. That's a hit. That is a direct hit. So we're going to bounce off between some Western Placidus astrology and the human design charts, but really I'm going to be talking about them so that we can use their charts and use their aspects as a point of departure. And it has to do with this subject and topic. And what is going on here? There's no place for you to go. You are going to. All right, we got a hassle in Catland here. Catlandia. What's going on with you two? Rosie got run off. Oh, are you here now? So Jupiter has arrived. Jupiter's arrived. Say hello to everybody. Yep, there he is. This is his domain. She was getting a little squirrely, huh? You want to say hi to people? Say hi to everyone. So we're gonna look at these charts tonight because there's a lot to talk about, and I'm even gonna play like a clip from Jordan Peterson. And I heard this coming back from Dallas on Thursday night, and it just completely shattered the ice. And it was like this epiphany just nailed me right between the eyes. And I'm going to play the clip from Peterson later, and then I'm going to extrapolate on it. And it speaks exactly to where we are today, the dilemma that we face. And hopefully between these two charts and these two men who are in many ways heroic and in many ways very human, and in Peterson's case, maybe all too human. I hope that by the end of the night, you'll have a greater sense of depth and resonance as to how far we've fallen and what it might take in order for us to be able to restitch the seams of our souls individually and collectively. And we're going to have to go through a lot here. I think we're headed into a very dark time. And that's where I'm going to get into the eclipse that's coming up next week. And it's going to happen right on the ascendant of the United States. And we're going to look at that, and we're going to try to make heads and tails of that. And I have to say, this last eclipse did affect me. I don't want to get into it too much, but it did affect me. And it affected me in a way where, how do I say this? There were elements in my own psyche, in my own character, in my own makeup that were definitely revealed to me. And at the same time, there were other elements that were also revealed that I was able to look at and speak to, that I think was empowering. I don't want to talk about it right now. It's still too fresh, and it's not anything like, massive in a way that you may be able to learn something from, but it was for me. So this last eclipse definitely hit me. And whenever I go into an eclipse, I try to be as neutral as possible. I'm not there to project into it. I'm not there to maneuver away from it, right? It's like, I'll be present and I'll live my life. And if something comes up, I guarantee you it'll come up, and then I'll have to deal with it on some level. And it did. And it was good. It was good. And actually, Robert Bly helped me understand certain elements about that moment. And essentially, what he said was that once you approach insolence, the door closes. And every now and then, I wouldn't say I was insolent, but every now and then I have a moment. I just have a moment. And I look around and I'll see somebody who is doing something on YouTube, and I'll look at it and I'll go, just in my head, I'll just say, well, fuck, this is really lightweight. This is really lightweight. And this person is getting 70,000 views for this. And I've worked on this for a while, and I've had to just accept in a lot of ways, right? It is not the quantity, it is the quality. I mean, and I'm really pretty good at it, but every now and then one gets in there and it tests me. It tests me like, how far have you come with this? So I had one of those tests the other day. It was last week. And there were a few other things that were going on at the same time. And it was like, I got kind of pissy. And I got insolent. And you wouldn't necessarily see it, but it doesn't happen a lot. But when it does happen, it's something that I'm not that proud of, honestly. So I went through this moment, and then Bly read this poem by Rumi, and it shifted everything. And I did a few things internally and did a few things externally, and I could just feel the energy move. You just feel it move. You hit that wall, and then you see something or experience something, and you let it come inside of you, right? You let it get inside in a good way, not in a bad way. You let it get inside in a good way, and then you make an adjustment. And then once you make the adjustment, it's liberating and freeing, and it's no longer a demon that's possessing you. So that was good. That was good. So it prompted me to get into Bly more, because like, okay, if that poem in that moment, and his reading of that poem in that moment, when I was actually going through something similar in that moment, was there, maybe there's more of it there. And so I spent time with this video of him and Bill Moyers, and I can surely attest that there is a there. So we're going to get into that tonight, and I think that's it for now. I think that's at least as far as the schedule goes. What do you want? What do you want? We got to come up with a new word for the new thing. We should come up with a new word. You know, the new thing that's come out of South Africa, the Botswana. What are you doing? The Botswana thing begins with an ohm and ends in a crone, right? That thing. That's it's quite interesting because if you look at the word omicron or omicron, you have the word Cronus in it, right? You have cron, which is time. And then you have ohm, which is like over, right? Omi, it's over time. Let's just get the rendering here. Let's see. It's very funny. The Omicron, the nomad soul, pops up when you type in Omicron. That's interesting. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that video game in a minute. Let's see what we have here. From the ancient Greek, Omicron. There's the Greek letter over Omicron. The 15th letter of classical modern Greek and the 16th in ancient Old Greek. Look, they got the two anagrams already lined up. Khmer and moronic. People have been all over this. My Twitter feed was like within 24 hours, the decodes were coming. They were coming. All right, so Omi. We're going to get into the roots here. Omi. Oh, it's got a lot of there's a lot of acronyms here. This is the acronym browser. Well, that'd be kind of cool, but we want to get right to it. Oblates of Mary Immaculate. Oh, you know what else? You know what else Omi is? Old myocardial infarction. Isn't that interesting? Old myocardial infarction. That's called heart disease. Very interesting. Omi is a hereditary noble title of ancient Japan. The head of a clan in ancient Japan. Open model interface. Omi has a meaning in Hebrew as well. It means pleasantness. It's the name of the mother-in-law of Ruth. Interesting. And then we have Naomi. Naomi, beautiful, pleasant. Interesting. Anyway, we're going to call it that thing. We're just going to call it that thing. That thing got up to speed like so fucking fast. It got up to, well, it got up to speed like warp speed. That's how much it got up to speed. That was fast. Now all of a sudden they've got a concoction they got to brew for that thing. It's going to be ready to go. Because, oh my God, this is the worst variation of the carjack that we've seen yet. And the natives are restless. I mean, the natives are restless. So they have to come in with that thing that's going to be worse than the thing that was there before. Everything from here on out is going to be worse than it ever was before. Think about that. Wrap your head around that. If you thought the last thing was bad, this thing is going to be worse. And guess what? The next thing is probably going to be even worse. So you have a future of terrible things staring at you. But are they really that terrible? That's the thing. All right. We're gonna talk a little bit about that. We may talk a little bit around it, but it'll definitely be part of the conversation because it's also connected to the dark winter, and we're about ready to head into the dark winter. We are moving now. We are moving into the dark winter. The signs and the signifiers are there. And we'll talk about some of that too. Social signs and signifiers of the dark winter are upon us. I'll get into some of that. And always, hopefully some astrological strategies for success to navigate through this time. So let's see who else is here. April, what's going on, April? Mark S. What's going on, Mark S? Hello, Lapicius is here. The lovely Lapicius. Let's see, Welsh Roses in the house. Gucci to Goats, G to G. Yes, you guys are great. Follow me over here. Appreciate that. Tara K, there's my man. Thomas Jordan. Deanna M. I can see you forgot to disable chat. Yeah, well, we're here. We're here for a reason. I guess you could chat over there, but why would you want to be over there now? Lisa Chambliss, what's going on? Good to see you. Maya Rose. Icon, when did the hat guy have a gap between his front teeth? I don't know. Good question. Ryan, hey, what's going on, Ryan? How are you? Let's see. Oh, Crimmies are here. Dave Sullivan. That's why I like to drink alone. Some people in bars just can't take a joke. Let's call it G. I like that, Steve. Gigi Abby Lynn, Turning Japanese. I love that song. Do you know Russell Mulcahy did the video for that? He's the guy that did the video for Hungry Like the Wolf and Rio and the movie Highlander. Very talented guy. Omicron, site that sells, it is a distributor for companies who make 5G network infrastructure. How about that? Good find, JJ. Thor at the door. What's going on, Steve? Cato. There's a song in the Omicron game that goes, "Take Me to the Edge of Time." I think that's from the Hours CD. So I actually played that game. I played Omicron. It was really funny. I talked about this on a show I did with Nish. It wasn't this last Friday, but it was the Friday. I think it was the Friday before last. Maybe it was the Friday before last. So it was the Friday headed into Thanksgiving, and I did a Skype thing with Nish, and I talked about Omicron Nomad Soul with Bowie, and here we are, like a week later, we're chatting about Omicron. Anyway, I actually was sent the game because I interviewed David Bowie, and I was sent the game. I tried to play the game, and I wasn't a huge gamer, but I could figure shit out. So I'm trying to play this game. And it's like the weirdest fucking game. It has to do with like transmigration of souls, and you can be somebody else, right? You can move around and jump into other characters, and then you have to realize this is like I think they developed the game in 98 and it was just coming out in 99, or it was late 98, early 99, right around there. So games were not entirely that sophisticated at that time. And it was a French video game company that Bowie had agreed to do this deal with. So I'm trying to play this game, and I couldn't become David Bowie, right? So he's got, I think he has at least maybe one or two, maybe three characters in there. Like there are three versions of him. But I couldn't become Bowie. I could become his wife. I could become some nameless, kind of villainy guy. but I couldn't become Bowie. So I asked him about it. I said, hey, when I played your game, I realized I couldn't become you. And he says, oh, I know. That's a courtesy the French extended to me. That's like, and he said, no, you're not getting in there. He was hip. Like Bowie knows all about sympathetic magic. I've told the story before. I'm not going to tell it again. He knows all about sympathetic magic. He knew that on some level that if you could occupy him digitally, that for him, that would be a scary thing, that he would almost be possessed by millions of other people if they played the game to that extent. That's where his head was at. I know that's where his head was at. You couldn't be him. You had to be some secondary character. You could be Amon, but I had no interest in like jumping into Amon, at least not in the video game. I'm still trying to figure out if she was a dude. I know there's the name Iman. I'd be really bummed if he'd gone all I don't know, Lola on Iman. They got a kid supposedly, but who knows? Who knows this world now? The weird thing about Iman is that not long after Bowie disappeared, and maybe about a month later, she was on, I think, the Shopping Network or Q, whatever the Q Network. And she was like selling her clothing. She had a fashion line. She was really happy. Like your husband just died about a month ago, and you're on TV and you're selling your clothing and you're really happy. Maybe she was. Maybe he was a dick. Who knows? I think Bowie could probably be a dick, but he was also very funny, and he always had a sense of humor. He had a very lively sense of humor. If you haven't watched him, look for Beer in Spain with Peter Frampton. It's a VH1 or MTV followed him around, I think it was Barcelona. And he and Peter Frampton are looking for a beer. It's actually it's very lighthearted kind of jaunt around Spain with David Bowie looking for beer. Anyway, so I talked about that Omicron soul game about a week ago, and all of a sudden here we are. We're dealing with this whole Omicron thing. We're dealing with the thing. All right, who else do we have here? It's no micro. Is no micro. Omicron. Omicron. Okay, what else do we have here? They will say it's improved carjack. It will turn out to be the exact same recipes. Problem is, it's not worse. Well, it's not worse. You're right, but their marketing around it is fantastically tragic. Let's see. Kate says, funny thing. Good to see you, Shannon. The cashier I talked to today was saying time no longer makes sense or feels right anymore. We're going to get into that. Chronos, there were two Chronoses. There was a Chronos with a Chronos. By the way, that's a really good movie. If you could find the movie Chronos, it was done by the producer of Koyaanisqatsi and Powell-Quatsi. Godfrey Reggio, I think, is the director, but this was not directed by him. This was directed by the producer, I believe, of those two movies. Chronos, the movie, is mind-blowing. It's all about time-lapse stuff. You know, like they do a time-lapse of Mont Saint-Michel. It's really a very cool film. Michael Stearns does the soundtrack for it. Highly recommend it. I haven't seen it in a long time. It's probably dated now, but it was really good when I saw it. So Cronus was a god that was related to time. I think comes out of sort of the Mycenaean, because Greek mythology goes through all these different iterations, like different gods kind of move in and move out. Other gods are merged. You know, then there's the whole Roman thing. You've got these two kinds of sets of competing gods, like the Avengers versus the Justice League, but they're the same gods in some ways, but they're not. So Cronus, Chronos, which is related to time, eventually merges and becomes Cronus, Cronus, who is the son of Uranus, who kills Uranus and then devours his young, because it's a prophecy, right? It's a prophecy. He said that he would be killed by one of his children. And so he wants to be immortal. So he can't allow any of his children to live and kill him. So he devours his children. That's where you get into the whole Travis Scott imagery, like the devouring of the people, the devouring of the children, Chronos, in the Travis Scott Astro World sequence. So that's exactly what he's doing. He's devouring the children. So anyway, Cronus, we're going to look at Cronus tonight as it relates to Robert Bly and time and Saturn. And we're in this very unusual period and cycle where, time does feel weird. When we were in 2020, there really was no time. It was the end of time. We'd reached the end of time because all of our rituals had been obliterated. We didn't have these cycles of the season that we would live our lives by. The Olympics were put on hold. There was no NC2A. March Madness was none of that. The NBA season got shut down. Did some weird shit when they were in the bubble. And then football was decidedly strange. It went on, but it didn't really go on in the way that it had. People were always, to this day, people are, they're showing positive symptoms for COVID, or they'll test positive, or whatever that means, and then they'll sit out a game. It's a very easy way to affect betting outcomes, by the way. 3 of the Cowboys' best players were not available when they played the Raiders. So the Raiders had a much, much better chance. One of whom I know for a fact was dealing with a possibly positive COVID. Now, here's what's really funny, right? This is funny. He's sitting out because of some COVID thing, but he's right there in the fucking sidelines. Amari Cooper. He's right in the sideline. He's right next to CeeDee Lamb, who has some kind of a concussion thing. Didn't look too concussed to me, by the way. And then DeMarcus Lawrence, who I think is recovering for some knee injury or something like that. They're all standing next to each other. And one of them, Amari Cooper, is like being held out for, COVID-19 reasons, but he's standing there. There's no social distancing. He's not wearing a mask. But he did affect the outcome of the game by not playing. So I caught wind of that last year when the NFL was doing that. I was like, man, this fucking stinks. You guys are changing the outcome of games. And because there's so much money now in betting on football, huge amounts of money. We're talking over the course of an NFL season, probably close to $1 billion in gambling on games. And that's not like talking about things like DraftKings, where you're playing, basically Sunday fantasy, where you buy a bunch of teams. Now I'm talking about just regular betting, playing the odds, spreads, whatever, right? Over-unders, parlays, huge amounts of money. So the NFL has gotten involved. And Jerry Jones, I think, I know he's involved in DraftKings, which is a betting site. So you have owners of teams. But Robert Kraft, I think, is also in on DraftKings. So you've got these NFL owners who are part of these betting sites, and yet there's no there's no separation of church and state. So if players have to sit out, So last year there was a game with the Broncos. It was the Broncos, and I think they were playing might have been Kansas City or Green Bay. I think it's Green Bay. And their quarterbacks were all in the same room, and they one guy had tested positive, but we know what that means. That means that, Kerry Mullis is throwing etheric lightning bolts from wherever he is. And as a result of that, none of those guys could play on Sunday. They had no quarterback. They had to use this guy who played quarterback as a freshman in college, and he was on the practice squad as a wide receiver, and he wasn't even a very good quarterback in college. So they used him, and they didn't take the game off the books. I'm like, this is fishy. Somebody's going to make a lot of money off this game. There was no way the Broncos were going to win that game. No way. They weren't even going to cover, and that's exactly what happened. All right, let's see. What do we have here? Let's see. Ninurta is the Sumerian god related to Saturn, associated with farming, healing, hunting, law, scribes, and war. Thanks for that, Sibylla. Anastasia, cosmic astrologer, and Robert Phoenix, and Bracker Goldsmith, and Pam Gregory. Okay, what do we have here? Go to the books celebrity with Angie Bowie. Angie was a trip. Angie Bowie comes out of military. Her father was like a colonel or a general, and it's pretty clear she was handling David. She was definitely handling David. That's what it felt like. She was a dominant force in his life. Leo came, my man David. We should not forget that Saturn ruled in the golden era. We talked about Saturn as the second sun, and actually the first sun. Our current sun being the second sun. And we've actually talked about that, and we've talked about how there was that this place was very different. And there was the light was more purple. It was almost more like UV, and it was very tropical and very kind of misty and very Garden of Eden like. We've talked about that, and then something happens, right? Then something happens. We have a war in the heavens, and everything gets displaced. And then we have this other sun that comes on board. Then we have this moon that's brought into place, and then everything shifts. And here we are. So yeah, that was those are interesting times. Let's see. What else do we have here? I think we're pretty good, right? William Stick Evers. I know William. Kevin comes in here from time to time. Hey, Carol, how's it going? Good to see you. Ms. Matrix Metaphor. Long Reach One. All right. Okay. So let's get into the show. I think I've got a nice little roll call here. And welcome. People who are new, welcome. So, sometimes I do this invocation. So tonight I'll do a little invocation here. And we'll call it a blessing. We'll call it a blessing. And let's bless the children, because the children are facing a very difficult time, and their parents, their mothers, and their fathers are facing very difficult times and choices which appear to be difficult on the surface. But really, when you look into your soul, they're not. There's only one choice, and that's the choice to protect your child, to not give your child up to Cronus. So Cronus does not devour your beloved child. So let's bless these children, and let's ask that they are protected, and protected by the people that love them, protected by the people that care for them, and protected by forces that are not always visible to them or the people that should be protecting them. And let us bless those forces as they become part of their blessing, become part of their protection. So let's bless them and all those who would protect them. And why don't we start there and let's get going. All right. Let's do a little chart of the moment. Let's see what's cooking up there. And then we're going to get into Robert Bly, Jordan Peterson. It's going to be fun. And we're going to get into this upcoming eclipse. So let's get rocking. Let me go over to Astro. Yeah, I go here. It's fine. All right. Oh, we've got the moon in Virgo. How about that? Make sure I got the location correct. Let's see. All right. Here we go. Here it is right here. Chart of the moment. Let's check it out. Oh. Yeah, there it is. All right. So how did everybody feel last week on Thanksgiving? Did you feel that? Did you feel that Leo moon coming in? Did you feel that? Let me tell you, Leo moon was a very good moon for the Raider game. A lot of costumery. Okay, here we go. By the way, I got to say, Cowboy fans, you were okay. You know why? Because Raider fans can be assholes a little bit. And Cowboy fans, they were cool. Good people. So thumbs up to Cowboy fans. All right, here we go. We got Cancer rising, which we've been seeing here during this time over the last few Sunday nights. So the idea here would be to take in some nurturing, to be sensitive, to be open to the influx of what's coming through each and every one of us here. And I tell you, people have Cancer, right? It's a hard rising sign, Cancer rising. Easier for women, I think. But even for women, it can be a bit much, right? Because it could be very feminine and almost overwhelming in some ways. Because when a woman with a Cancer rising is really in her feeling, you can feel it. And it could be any kind of feeling. It could be joyous and peaceful or passionate, or it can be stormy, right? I mean, but you'll feel it because she will really amplify those feelings, really amplify the feelings. I think it's a little more difficult for men with Cancer rising because men generally have a more difficult time with their feelings. True emotions, not fake ass feelings. There's a lot of fake ass feelings. A lot of people think they have feelings, but they really don't have feelings. What they have is that they're experiencing certain states or certain conditions, but they're not really having feelings. Like jealousy is not a feeling. Jealousy is a state, right? It's a state. It's not really a feeling. There are a number of things that are states, but they're not real feelings. So we have a lot of people who occupy certain states, and they think they're feelings, but they're really not. And then there are people who know what real feelings are, real emotions are. So, but I do think for Cancer rising with young men or men in general, it can be a bit difficult. As they get older, of course, you get to figure out your rising sign. The key with Cancer rising is you got to know, I'm going to pull right out of a David Bowie song, Modern Love. You got to know when to go out. You got to know when to go out. You got to know when to stay in, get things done. That is Cancer rising in a nutshell. You got to know your cycles, your timing. You got to listen to your body. If you're feeling tired, your Cancer rising, tired, exhausted, probably pretty good sign. You should probably recharge. Because there's nothing worse than a tired, hungry, exhausted Cancer rising. Cranky, crabby, not fun to be around. Not fun to be around. So the key with Cancer rising, you got to know what your cycles are. You got to know when to go all in, when to retreat, right? It's this dance. It's tidal. Cancer rising is tidal. So I do think it's a bit more difficult for men. But as they get older, they figure it out, hopefully. So here we go. We've got Moon in Virgo. So tomorrow when you wake up, Moon will be in Libra. It should be a pretty good Monday. I mean, it's not like it's a Monday from a short week, but it should be a pretty good Monday. We've got Moon in Virgo, which tends to be fair, balanced, just. We have a nice little sextile action with Mercury and Sun in Sagittarius. Got a nice trine to Saturn. Monday could be good. If you've got to go somewhere and work and do something, like this Monday has the potential of getting your week off on a good note. More balance, even though we're looking at the balsamic phase starting to come into play here and getting ready for this eclipse. We're in the eclipse cycle, by the way. I think we're entering into the eclipse cycle with a better sense of balance. And again, if you had any issues, and some of you folks here, you may be watching this from other countries, other places that are not in the Northern Hemisphere or whatever. But if you were able to resolve some things, because whether or not you had a Thanksgiving weekend or whatever last week, there's an opportunity to resolve some things, to get through some issues, to get through some rejection and fear. So hopefully being able to do some of that. And now we're coming into this week maybe a bit more balanced. We are coming off of this Moon-Neptune opposition, which was really happening from yesterday, today. I just took it easy yesterday, today. Not a lot of stress. But we're moving out of that now. We're moving out of that critical Moon in Virgo in a much more fair balance. That's going to be interesting too. This week, people are going back to work, and we're still dealing with limitations, and we're going to be dealing with more limitations. Like the limitations are not going to let up. We're going to deal with more limitations. So it's going to be very interesting to see how people adjust in this coming week, especially with the Moon coming into Libra and those scales of balance and having that nice sextile with Sagittarius. And we got this Moon, Mercury Sun conjunction. This would be a Monday in a week, well, certainly this Monday, even Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you can balance how you feel and be fair about how you feel, you could tell people a lot of shit this week. Like you could, if you are real, and not in a manipulative way. Let me just try to preface this. If you can get very reconciled on an emotional level about what's fair and what's clear, the brief leap from there to be able to communicate that with people in this Sagittarian kind of way, which is really about being authentic and truthful, really good. Really, really good. If you have to negotiate, this is the week to do it. Even if we're in an eclipse zone, don't worry about it. If you have to negotiate, this is the week to do it. If you have to make a case for yourself to be able to go to work or do something else that requires you to be as free as you possibly can be in order to be your most fully effective human being. This is the week to state that case, because you can do it in a way where it's cerebral and fair. And if you need to be very, how do I say this, emotionally balanced about your religious beliefs and convictions, and yet forceful enough so that they're not watered down, this is the week to do that. It's a good week. And then we're going to have the moon playing catch up here. So what are we talking about? Thursday, the moon's going to be moving into Scorpio, going to be conjuncting Mars. That'll be a very interesting time. The moon Uranus opposition, which we'll get into around Wednesday, right? That's going to start to show up around Wednesday. That's going to be very intense, because we're dealing with that's going to be a prelude in a lot of ways to the nodal shift, which is going to happen in the first week of January. And we could already see the nodal shift begin to take shape around us. Are you paying attention to flash mobs? Are you paying attention to them? If you're not, you should. It's a prelude of the nodal shift when the true node goes into Taurus and the south node goes into Scorpio. You need to pay attention to these flash mobs. They are going to increase in frequency, in number. And my intuition is that they are organized. These are not just random kids. And a lot of them are kids, by the way. You know, it reminds me it's funny, I was watching this movie last week. And it reminds me of the movie. Well, it reminds me of two movies, actually. Well, three. But it reminds me of Oliver. You know, Oliver Twist. And I was watching the David Lean version, which is very good, by the way. If you're into older cinema, that's a great movie. It's a great, great, great version of Oliver. And David Lean is a master of lighting. It's just incredible. It's like he filmed Oliver in this film noir style. It's kind of amazing. And who's in it? Alec Guinness plays, what's his name? The thief. It'll come to me. It'll pop into my head. But it's a great, anyway, it's about a gang. It's about a gang of kids. And they're organized. They're an organized gang of pickpockets. And this is what we're looking at now. These are organized. So there's a reason why kids are doing this. Because in the state of California, and in most states, by the way, if you're under 17 and you commit a violent crime or you commit a borderline felony, your jail time will be very limited. In fact, most cases in California will just be dismissed. So Fagin is who Alec Guinness plays. In fact, interesting story. So Fagin, if you don't know, is Jewish. Fagin is Jewish. Just letting you know, right? And they made Alec Guinness look like the most intense, borderline, subhuman Jewish king of the pickpockets. I swear to God. And that's after they cut scenes out. I guess they had their own version of like the JDL or whatever, or the ADL, and they were like, you can't distribute this movie in America. You've got to take. So they took out about 60 edits of Alec Guinness playing Fagin. But that movie was like, I was like watching that movie, and then I'm thinking, yeah, these gangs are organized. So they've got Fagins, and I can tell you who's organizing these gangs. It's not rocket science. State of California and other states across the country have let out thousands of career criminals. Now, some of them might just go back into their lives, whatever lives they've had, right, or they would have had. but some are not and will not. And here's my intuition was that before they were released, they were saying, this is what we're going to do. So my sense here is that these flash mobs with these kids are being run and organized by older criminals, people who are in the joint, and they're running these mobs, and they're not going to go away. This is what happens when we see the true node in Taurus and the south node in Scorpio. And I talked about this last week, that they are coming for your shit. They're coming for your shit. They're telling you what they're going to do. And it's either going to be, at a restaurant in LA or at a department store in, I don't think they'd ever do it in Palo Alto. I don't think Team Google would allow shit to happen in Palo Alto, but they would in Marin County, and it has. Right, so this is happening. So whether it's there or whether they are going to go through Build Back Better and grab your land or your resources so they can defeat the demonic carbon spirits, it's going to happen. They're telling you what's going to happen. They're going to come for your shit. And I think when we see this moon move into Scorpio and we see this opposition right around Wednesday with Uranus, we'll have insight into that. Shocking, perhaps, insight into that. And the problem, here's the real problem now. Life has become Dollar General. We're living a Dollar General life. And people just don't have any regard for the human existence anymore. It's become so cheap and so disposable. So therefore, people really don't think twice now about the consequences and circumstances and consequences around taking somebody's life. I mean, this is kind of where we are now. And it's fueled also by a sense of desperation. That's another piece here, because there's really no sense of tomorrow. They're taking, this gets back to the time thing. It gets back into Cronus. And, we're not going to have any real hard transits to Neptune until about 2 weeks from now. We'll start to see some of this. We'll start to see some of the facade and the illusion just get completely ripped away. When the sun goes into Sag at 13 degrees, so it's really like about 2 weeks. It's called 12 days from now. Mercury's going to be there very close as well. So we get into that period. That's when I think we're going to start to really see how the veil is just dropping. It's just dropping, and we're beginning to see where things are headed, and they're not pretty, because they're already telling you, they're already telegraphing this. They're already telegraphing that empires fall, and they're creating the circumstances, the synthetic collapse of this country. And some of it needs to go away. I've said that before. Some of it needs to go away. But not all of it, not in the way that it's being engineered and orchestrated. And we're going to start to see some of that, in 2 weeks. And I feel like this moon opposition with Uranus coming up, because it's really close to Mars, it's getting really close to Mars. And it's this prelude to the eclipse. And that's a troubling time, because I think we get to get a real sense of the violence. Like, the violence is just ramping up, whether it's implied or being enacted. I saw, if you ever go to was it the VidMax? They show a lot of really scandalous videos. I saw 2 videos tonight. I'm not going to play them, but they really speak to what I'm talking about. There's this wave. There's this wave of aggression and violence that's growing, and it's bringing strange people in strange moments in time together in oddly fated ways. And there was an event that just happened in Aurora, Colorado. Of course, that's where they had the James Holmes thing. And it was so bizarre. It was a guy who lived in the neighborhood, 36-year-old ex-cop, and he was armed. And there were these young guys, and they were fucking around, and they were cruising around the streets, and it's nighttime, and they were dangerous. So the guy in his truck stops him and calls him out on it. And so they start giving him shit. And these kids are no more than 16, 17 years old, giving him shit. And this one guy in the car, one young guy, pulls out a gun. And the truck driver, who I think at that time, or the guy who's in the truck, it's not like a diesel. It's just a truck with a little smaller camper shell on it. At that time, I think he's out of the truck and he's talking to them, and the kid pulls a gun on him. He actually winds up shooting the guy. The kid doesn't know the guy's an ex-cop, and he's got a concealed carry permit. And he puts, I think, 8 slugs in him. I think he empties a clip into him. And then you have these other kids, and they're kids, right? And they're running into the house, and there are these girls, and it's like, where the fuck are the adults? Where the fuck are the adults? Where are the fathers? There's no fathers around. You can see, but it's one of those cameras that, that videotape your whatever their rings or whatever. I don't know what they're called. And you can see as they get out, you can see the smoke coming out, right? They're smoking. What are they smoking? My guess is that they're getting high. That's my guess. That they're getting high. And so there's just a sense of doom. There's like this sense of doom that's being permeated through this house. And this kid is dead, right? He's almost dead. Somebody comes and tries to save him. And then one of the dipshit kids tells him to leave. Well, why would you want him to leave? The guy still has a pulse. That just happened. You'll probably hear about that if you haven't already. And same channel, this guy who they brought over from Afghanistan in San Francisco, he goes fucking nuts. He's running through this apartment complex with a knife in his hand, shouting Allahu Akbar. I swear to God. And it's caught on the camera there in the apartment, in the hallway. And these 2 cops are there, and they're firing beanbag rounds at the guy. Well, the guy apparently didn't make it, even with the beanbag rounds. And this is where things are headed. And the guy who was from Afghanistan was a former translator. So he'd been flown out of Afghanistan, flown here. He's in San Francisco. I don't know what flipped his wig, but he's going after these cops with a knife, yelling Allahu Akbar. Fucking nuts. So this is the cycle now that we're in. It's a very dangerous cycle. And especially with Mars and Scorpio. We have 10 more degrees of Mars and Scorpio. And Mars and Sagittarius have very different energy. But Mars and Scorpio has to deal with the underworld. It's cleared Uranus, but we got the moon coming up here. And it's a very dark energy. It's a very dark energy leading into the eclipse. And you could just see kind of what's going on now. People are getting desperate. There's no tomorrow. There's no tomorrow for these people. Like they instinctively, they know there's no, maybe if you're into, the green, the new green dream. Oh my God, what a great world we're headed towards. Oh my God, this is going to be great. everybody's going to be, flexible with pronouns, and we'll drive, electric flying cars, and everybody won't be mean to each other anymore. I mean, there are some people I think do believe in that, but it feels to me like that world is really shrinking in a lot of ways. They think they have a tomorrow, but there are a lot of people who are probably watching this, and they're asking themselves, do I have a tomorrow? Do we have a tomorrow? Because clearly it's not guaranteed. It is not guaranteed. Brings us back to Cronus and time. We've run out of time. We're living in this very strange place where the Janus ritual has not completed itself. We're close, but we're not there yet. So this is a very, when people don't feel like they have a future, that's when desperation really begins to creep into things. And whether they consciously are aware that they don't have a future, or whether they're unconsciously intuiting that they don't have a future, the results are pretty much the same. Now, there are some people who will take advantage of a time like this. No doubt. They don't care. They'll just live for the moment, and they'll take their chances with whatever forces of chaos they can align themselves with. And that part is true and real. And so they're going to jump on that. They're going to be part of that wave. And then there's going to be a group of people who are actually invested in life. A group of people who are actually invested in creating a new set of values, which really aren't all that new. They're just a lot of them that we've abdicated and given up. When we get into Bly and Jordan Peterson, I'll talk more about that. So we should have some insight around Wednesday into this shocking unearthing of material from the underworld. We've got this square with Jupiter to Mars. And here it just makes it, what that Jupiter square to Mars reminds me of? It reminds me of what that dipshit Seth Rogen said about living in LA. And that, man, it's just the price to pay, man. It's the coolest place to live on Earth. So what? You got to give up a watch or a wallet every now and then. That's a Jupiter fucking Mars square right there. It's like, let's put on the, the rose tinted they live glasses and just try to bullshit people that this is the norm. No, it's not the norm. It is not the norm. But that's the Jupiter Mars square. You'll get more of it, but you'll also get these confabulated social justifications. Don't sweat it, man. Chill out, man. Come on, you're so attached to your things. Are you your things, man? Really think about it. See what happens if it happened to Seth Rogen. He might have a few other things to say about it, especially if there's some collateral damage. We got Saturn catching up to Uranus. We got that square. Right, that's been going on for a while. But now Saturn's moving forward. When Saturn moves forward, the lords of Saturn move forward. Right, that's what they do. It's like, okay, let's march on. Let's have this new chapter. That's what happens when Saturn moves forward. When it was retrograde there for a while, I think that they probably couldn't move forward as quickly as they like. Now the hordes of Sauron are moving forward. They're marching forward. And by where are we going? It's 8 degrees, so it'll be exact by the end of next week. So going into the holidays, Saturn Uranus square, like the Christmas, pretty intense. We'll have Saturn Uranus square going into the eclipse. I mean, it's already there. It'll be 9 degrees, probably high 9, low 10. We'll find out when we go to the eclipse chart. That's another factor, Saturn Uranus square. Shaking things up. Where do we have there was an earthquake recently. There was like a 7.0. I would not be surprised if we see some seismic activity go along with this. It's getting close, right? Coming back into really tight orb here. It goes back to when we got into that Saturn-Uranus square early in the year, where, what was it? Went up to 7 degrees. And I just remember that time at the beginning of the year being so intense. Or March, April, just super, super intense. You know, we're coming out of the whole January 6th thing, right? So I think we see some more of that intensity. Now, supposedly there's what, like an incoming object, one of these meteors, one of these space objects. I would be surprised if we see more of that too. Especially when that true node moves into Taurus, we start dealing with rocks and flying rocks from the spacey firmament. All that said, I think this could be a good week. I know I just doled out a lot of doom, but I feel like this moon in Libra really kicks in a good way. And even when we get the moon in Libra a day from what's like on Tuesday, starts, you know, trying into Jupiter, it's more of a sense of hope and possibility. You know, that being fair and balanced actually pays off, gives you kind of a better sense as to maybe a kind of world that you do want to have or do want to inhabit. So that's there. All right, there's our chart at the moment. Let's get into some of this Robert Bly stuff. So I'm going to play, I got some clips that I pulled out of this documentary. I'm going to play a few of them. I think they're really good clips. Some of them are a little bit longer than others. So let me, why don't I do this? Why don't I establish Robert Bly's horoscope, his natal chart. So you guys can kind of get a cosmic sense as to what Bly was about. And I actually think he has a pretty interesting chart. So he was born on November, his birthday, Capricorn, December 23rd, 1926, 7:20 a.m. in Madison, Minnesota. And he is a fire tiger, and his birth path is an 8. I think that really suits him. You know, he takes on that 8 persona. To me, 8 is a very Capricornian number. Like you're at the top. 8 is the pinnacle. When you hit the 9, you hit 9, you're headed on, you're going back down the other side of the mountain. That's what 9 is. You're going back down the other. 8, you hit the pinnacle. And 8s tend to, if you have an 8 birth path or life path, you theoretically are wired for some high level of success. If you do not reach success and that is your number, that is your life path, it will be very frustrating because you'll never feel that you're in charge of your own destiny or your own creative output. So if you have kids that have an 8 birth path or life path, do your best to empower them so that they can be very self-actualized, but not tyrants. All right, so let's look at his chart. So he's a Sag rising. So he's very philosophical. You'll find that when we watch a couple of these clips. He's very philosophical. And a lot of times, poetry and philosophy don't always go together because philosophy is very, how do I say it? Philosophy can be very dry in a lot of ways. and more didactic. And poetry is not philosophy. Poetry is, image, symbol, simile, metaphor. It doesn't always have to make sense. It doesn't always have to have a moral code that is associated with it, although sometimes it does. So philosophy and poetry are two very different modes of expression. And it's rare when you see a philosopher and a poet in the same body. They don't always occupy the same body because you're using different sides of your brain. But Bly is one of those rare characters that is both a philosopher and a poet. And you can see this with Sagittarius rising. He's got Mercury and Saturn in the 12th house. He's a very Saturn 12th house character because he's dealing with issues around the father. And this is Saturn in the 12th house is driving him. And it drives him towards his work around men and fathers, and his own father, who you can see the Saturn Neptune square, his own father, who's an alcoholic. And he has to reconcile a lot of these things about his own father in his own life. And he spent, I can guarantee you, with Saturn in the 12th house, he spent a lot of time thinking about it, plunging into it, and probing this relationship with the father. And to me, Saturn in Sagittarius has to do with some kind of restoration of divine law. Saturn in Capricorn is not about the adjudication of divine law. It is about the adjudication of worldly affairs of state, but not Saturn in Sagittarius. There's also a rebellious quality to Saturn. He even talks about it. He talks about how when he first started writing for this poetry review, he was an editor for a poetry review. He went after all the old poets. He wanted to kill the king. He didn't go after male poets. He didn't go after all the old female poets. He went after all the old male poets. That's the Saturn-Uranus square. And so Saturn has tempered Bly so that over time, he's able to deal with a generation who had been rebellious and wanted to kill their own father. And he's able to hold that space for them. You can see this. I'll show you some of these clips. Then what's really interesting is you can also see this sun at 0 Capricorn. So he's about as Capricorn as it gets, right? The guy's born, one day before Christmas Eve. He's born on, at that time, the winter solstice. So he is like the king of winter. He comes from the north. He comes out of Madison, Minnesota, and you look at him and he has that very kind of, Norwegian Nordic look about him. And he's big in the chest, and he talks about kings a lot, actually. And when he really started the men's work, which is around 85, 86, that's when Neptune is right on his sun. So he's having that Neptune and Capricorn transit right onto his sun. So he becomes more selfless. And at the same time, he becomes poetic. He was always poetic, but now he's got a poetic context, and it's sharing this poetic kind of, how do I say this? This poetic dharma with men, younger men. And he fulfills the role of being this kind of archetypal father for these men, many of whom are lost and obliterated by feminism. But there's deeper roots than that. And he talks about them. And I'm going to show you what he talks about here in a minute. But you can see this. For that period of time, Neptune during the 80s and even into the early 90s, by the time Neptune begins to move into like second decan Neptune or second decan Capricorn, Bly is starting to move a bit away from that movement. And other people like Michael Meade are starting to kind of step in. But it's that real genesis period from the early 80s, around 83, 84, 85, right around there, really takes off, 86, 87, all the way through the early 90s. You can really feel that Neptune conjunction with Bly. He becomes very selfless in a lot of ways. He has Mars and Taurus, so he's super grounded. You'll see this with some of the video. He uses drum a lot, plays a drum a lot, and he'll drum when he speaks. And he's got that Mars Sun trine, and he's got a Mars Venus trine. And one of the things that Bly manages to do when he talks about men and he talks about women and the relation between men and women is that he's respectful of women. He doesn't, he's not like an incel, right? He's not a MGTOW. He's not a grandfather MGTOW. He's able to bridge this gap between men and women in a lot of ways. You can see it. And he's got a great fondness for the feminine. And I think the Venus conjunction with his sun makes him quite poetic, very poetic. And he's got a knack for drama, right? He's got a knack for presentation. He's got the moon in Leo from his 8th house. So he's reaching into that 8th house place, those depths, and finding his heart. And he's moving it right onto the ascendant so he can articulate his heart for other people. It's a very interesting chart. When you look at the work, it's fascinating. Very fascinating. I really feel like the Saturn Neptune is the work the square is the work he had to do with his own father. And that's really sort of the big square. The Jupiter in Aquarius, it's funny because I think right now Jupiter's at that same degree, right? So we're actually in Bly's Jupiter return, even though he just passed away last week. And he creates a community. He creates this community of men around him. But it's 2nd house. So there's a lot of things like drumming and storytelling, and it's very bardic in that way. And the idea here is to somehow draw down Neptune and the moon, right? To draw down the magic into the communal space with Jupiter in the 2nd house in Aquarius. And I think he does a tremendous job. And, he's got his critics, but there's never been anybody else like Robert Bly since Robert Bly, except for one guy, and that's Jordan Peterson. I'm going to talk about Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson is not a poet. Although he's very emotional, he is not a poet. Jordan Peterson is a philosopher. He's more than that. So you can see, and you'll see the difference between the poetic mind and the philosophical mind, or the scientific philosophical mind. Now, I also did their human design charts. So let me bring that up here. Let me get into my hub. So I'm going to show you Bly's human design chart. It's really fascinating. That's my chart. You don't really want to see that, although maybe you do, but you don't need to. So let's take a look at Robert Bly's chart, and we'll do this with Jordan Peterson as well. So Robert Bly, here's his chart. Now, he's an emotional projector, and he's going to say something that really gives away the goods on being a projector. I'm going to play it. And this is where human design, you can, like, when you look at something like astrology and human, by the way, I think they're both very legitimate and they both serve a purpose, I think for different reasons, but they're both super legitimate. He's a projector and he's emotional. You can hear it. And he's the martyr and the role model, right? So that's what he does. He becomes a role model for all these men. And the martyr part, I don't know. I can't really speak to that. Maybe he had to take on the sins of the poetry world, because Robert Bly became kind of like a superstar, right? He transcended poetry in a way that most poets will never do. And maybe because he became popular, people inside the poetry world, savaged him. I'd have to go back and look at some of the criticism around there. But you can see this here, right? He's an emotional projector. He's able to channel and hold all that emotion and energy from those men and he's a martyr role model, and he's guided by love, right angle cross of the vessel of love. Right? That's what he's into, right? And you can hear it. You can hear it. By the way, I am right angle cross vessel of love 3. And I'm a projector. I'm a 2-4. And his personality, strategic. Here's a really interesting word, right? All right. Strategic, innocence, uncertainty, observer, peripheral, probability. Remember this word, desire. Possibility is the transferred view, perfected form channels 1057, 2644, and 3955. So he's perfected form, surrender, and emotion. All right, so let me play you a little bit of Robert Bly. And I've sort of set the stage astrologically and human design. And I really dig this. This is the opening of the documentary. Pop this up here. Move it ahead just a little bit. Okay. This gives you a sense. If you've never seen Bly, this gives you a sense of his sense of the moment, timing, and drama. He's great.
We are leaving our time now. We are leaving our time now. There are places where time moves more slowly than here.
Remember, he's a Capricorn.
We honor all 4 directions: east, west, north, south.
Well, 1 second.
Places where time moves more slowly than here.
Remember, he's a Capricorn.
We honor all 4 directions.
Hold on, uno momentito. I have to shut down my my speakers here. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. Okay, so he talks about time. We're leaving our time now, and he's a Capricorn. He is the timekeeper. He's the Cronus version of timekeeping right now. Here we go.
We are leaving our time now. We are leaving our time now. There are places where time moves more slowly than here. We honor all 4 directions: east, west, north, south. And we also honor the 5th direction, the vertical one, which is in us today, here. Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen, and they lived in a castle. And near the castle, there was a forest. You know, there's always a forest near the castle. And this forest was like other forests, with one exception. When anyone went into it, he didn't come back. 5 hunters went out, and they didn't come back. 10 hunters were sent after them, and they didn't come back. Then 20 hunters went out, and they did not come back. And then 30 hunters were sent after them, and they did not come back. And pretty soon, no one went to that part of the forest anymore. Only occasionally a hawk or an eagle flew over it. That identifies this as a male story. Hawk and the eagle are male birds. That was the situation. That's the way it lasted for many years. Finally, one day, a young man came, and he said, "Anything dangerous to do out here?" And the king said, "Yes, it is, but I don't recommend it because the return rate is not good." And the young man said, "That's the sort of thing I like. I think I'll go." So he went, taking only his dog with him. Maybe the fact that he didn't go in a group was a part of it. He took only his dog with him, and he walked into the forest, and he walked a long way into the forest, and all of a sudden, a hand came up out of the pond and pulled the dog down. And he didn't get hysterical. He just said, "This must be the place."
I love that line, right? He says, he didn't get hysterical. He said, "This must be the place." And he's basically setting the stage for those guys, right? For those guys to go into the forest. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to say, you may not come back. Whatever happens here, you may not come back. And hopefully you don't come back the same person that you were when you walked in, or else why were you here in the first place? But you can get a sense as to the kind of the Mars and Taurus, you're trying the Capricorn sun in the first house. And he's a great storyteller. So that's how he started off a lot of his talks. And Bly's biggest piece around what happened to men, and this is, I really want to cover this because it's quite important, and it takes us into a place where we have somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse. Whatever you think of Kyle Rittenhouse, whether it's real or stage or whatever you think about it, Kyle Rittenhouse is a symbol of a world without fathers. And Jason Whitlock talked about this about a week ago. Where were the men, right? Where were the men during that whole crisis? Take Kyle Rittenhouse out of the equation for just a moment. Like, where were the men? The men were absent. The people that we had appointed to protect us couldn't protect us for any number of reasons. The very president of the United States, who supposedly is the father of the country, was absent. He was there, but he was ineffectual. And you can use all the rationale and logic and reasoning that you want. You can say, well, he couldn't do anything. His hands were tied. Or you could say that he wanted to show just how bad the threat was so that the Democrats would have no chance of being elected come November. And if your rationale was for that, then I think it was a poorly planned out stratagem for re-election, because it clearly didn't work. So we had a whole summer where the people who were supposed to protect us, and you had somebody like David Dorn, who was the police chief, or the police sergeant, who came out of retirement, I believe it was in Chicago, and got his head blown off. That's a symbol. That's a real symbol. And the only person who seems to have any sense of propriety and property and care for his community is Kyle Rittenhouse. Now, again, I'm not here to, at least not in this show, I'm not going to talk about what happened and all the other strange phenomena, which I've talked about a lot. I just want to isolate him as an individual in that moment where there were no other Kyle Rittenhouses in any other moment besides that one. And even beyond his young age, there was no version of a Kyle Rittenhouse. And it speaks to the fact that there were no men. And where did the men go? And what happened to the men? So we're going to try to trace that here. And Bly's going to be our gateway. And astrologically, Pluto is in those final degrees of Capricorn, right? So it's in the Virgo decan right now. And the Virgo decan is mutable. And so we look at this last phase of Pluto and Capricorn before it moves into super fixed first decan Aquarius, and that we have the ability to make changes through the Virgo decan. It's mutable. We can make changes. We can look at what's happening from this perspective, this Plutonian. When you get Pluto and Capricorn together, you're bringing the two most powerful deities, right, or gods, planetary gods together into one long, extended transit. You get Pluto in the underworld, and you get Saturn, which is Cronus and time, and they are joined together, right? So this time when Pluto went into Capricorn, if you know, and I knew what was going on, I could see it a mile away. And I wrote a lot about it. I wrote extensively about it because I knew that these times were going to be very intense and unlike any other time that we'd ever seen, and not real happy, not real positive. And that was during the first decan where we're going to experience it the most. You know, and who did we experience the most right out of that gate was Ben Bernanke. He was the guy that set the tone at the time. He basically said, so what? Tough shit. All those guys lost a lot of money. We're going to pay them back. And we're not going to care about where it goes. We're not going to tell you. And that's how it all started, right? It was the housing crisis, 2009. And then you could even see during the 2008 election, you had the young king and the old king. You had John McCain and Barack Obama. There was no contest. And that was, you know, slaying the old king. And there was going to be something new, something we had never seen before in Barack Obama. This has all happened in Pluto Capricorn. Remember that. So I want to play another piece here. And let me just find it. This has to do with fathers and what happened to fathers. Where our society, and I'm not just talking about the United States, although the United States is a big problem here when it comes to this hollowing out of our culture and a hollowing out of our lives. And Bly completely nails why we have this crisis around fathers and sons and men. He really nails it. I'm gonna play this for you. And it's never been more evident than now when I bring this up. He's with Bill Moyers. It's a kind of a long clip, but it's worth it. Here we go.
To be a man means that you need to develop the warrior, which means that you are not always obeying the body. Robert Moore of Chicago, who's doing wonderful work on the warrior and the king, I heard a tape of his and he said, now all of you who are in graduate school, if you don't have the warrior, you're going to be in trouble because you have to do a lot of unpleasant things in graduate school. And he said, I'm writing a book. If I don't have the warrior, I'm not going to finish this book.
The warrior enables us to
go. When the body says, it's let's quit and get some Haagen-Dazs, the warrior says, no, 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 no. And your body's okay when you're getting a massage. Right for now, we're going to do the task, and we're going to continue. Joe Campbell had a great warrior. In his 20s, he read 9 hours every day. That's the warrior that enables him to do that. So the warrior in men is not always the one that's out there killing people. That's not it. It's the one who is able to pursue a task until it's finished. And the warrior usually has a cause transcendent to himself.
Transcendent to himself, which means I will do it even if I can't explain it to other people.
Yes, I'm not doing it for my good. I'm not doing it for selfish reasons. I'm doing this for a cause that I believe in. The traditional way it's said is that the warrior works for the king, and the king is the one connected to the sun and to the spirit and to God. So that when the warrior, as in our culture, has no king, like Ollie North, then he gets in trouble. You know, the Japanese tell a story about it was a little pond, and the leader of this pond, I don't know, disappeared. So they hired the heron to be the king, and the heron ate up everyone in the pond. Because he was a warrior, he wasn't a king. The warrior will eat up everyone in the pond if he doesn't have a transcendent cause. So, but the Americans are very weak in the warrior now, the American men. The Japanese men were strong in the warrior during the Second World War, and they somehow transferred that into their briefcases and into their VCRs. And so we don't have warriors to stand up against them, even in the business world. Robert Moore, again on the warrior, has said wonderful things like the only warriors we have in the United States are the negative versions of it, the shadow versions, who are the drug lords. They're the ones. We need warriors in the city who are able to stand against the drug lords. But instead of that, we have only negative warriors.
But when you use the word warrior, most of the people watching and listening are going to say, well, he means the slayer, the
No,
combatant.
the warrior is not, in general terms, is not sent out there in order to harm and damage others. The warrior is a defender of the boundaries. When you live in a dysfunctional family, then people in the family cross your boundaries all the time. They will open the door, they'll say things, their mood is the strongest in the house, your moods mean nothing. You understand what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And when you're 3 and 4 years old in relation to grown-ups, you have no boundaries. They simply do what they want. And the sexual abuse really means, that didn't happen to me in a strong way, but it means you open the door and you go in. There's no way you have no boundaries. So the adult man and the adult woman needs to have a warrior so that they can hold the boundaries. So that one way that I see it now is that when we're 3 and 4 years old, the doorknob's on the outside of the door. Now I have to understand I'm not 3 to 4 years old now. I'm a grown person. And if I want to get the doorknob on the inside of the door, I will. If I do not wish to be shamed, that's my choice. But the hardest thing is to realize you're not 4 years old.
Yeah.
So therefore, with my father, I do not want or need to be shamed by him any longer. Well, that means that there's been some movement to get the doorknob on the inside of the door. That's called a warrior. A warrior is not someone that goes off and kills. That's the negative warrior. That's the one that's without the king. But each of us needs our warrior desperately. Women have a very fierce warrior in them, you know. Mm-hmm. They have a very fierce warrior. And I would say that the women in the last 20 years have much greater sense of their own boundaries than the men do. So, I have felt that the men have suffered a great deal in losing the wild man, which is a certain form of spontaneity connected with the wilderness itself. And they've suffered a great deal since the Second World War in losing the warrior. It's very strange how this works. We gave up the king. That is, we founded our country with getting rid of the king. And you know, the king is weak in American men also. How could it be otherwise?
The king being?
The king, the part of the man that determines what he is going to do now, what my course is going to be.
The king can decide that for himself.
This is the inner king,
that's the whole image,
the one who's down there,
yes,
who decides. And when he comes in, follow your bliss is what Joe Campbell said. That means that the king decides that. You don't join IBM and then do what your boss wants you to do. That means there's only one king in the whole thing, and that's the boss, and everybody else is a non-king.
That's the way the world works.
Yeah, that's the way it works. That's the way it destroys inner kings in all of the men and in most of the women. So the king then is that part of you that can decide. And I mean, it's very private too, because there are various kinds of kings. When I am with a group of 200 people, my king is fairly strong. I'll decide what I want to happen that day. When I'm with 3 or 4 people, my king is moderate.
Okay, so this is where he gets into human design. He doesn't even know it. Like when he's with 200 people, that's a projector moment. Like 200 people, he's in king mode with 200 people because he can handle that. He's a projector. But as the numbers go down, he becomes less, how do I say this? He becomes less royal, I guess, right? Watch what happens here.
Strong. Yeah. But they can still drag me off to a movie I don't want to go to. When I'm with one person, my king is rather weak. And I think that's because of all those crossing of boundaries and so on when I was a child. So that if I go in, for example, with my wife into a store, and there's 2 sweaters, one is green and the other is blue, I can't decide. And I say to her, what do you think? She said, oh, the blue is beautiful. Immediately the green fades into some hideous color. You understand me?
I do, but I'm troubled by the analogy, because we can't go back to being an Aboriginal society. We can't become a traditional society. We cannot restore those images that were transferred to the boy through the initiation, can we?
No, but we have a much stronger, resilient man once he goes through the process. They produce a rather brittle one, I think. It's for a purpose, to protect them from the neighboring tribes. But, so we're not saying that all of that is good. What I'm saying is that we can't go on any longer without trying to do initiation consciously. We can't go on any longer without trying to be conscious of that which affects us. Because each generation, the men are farther and farther separated from the grandfathers and from the kings and from the inner warriors. And so they're weaker in some way in every generation.
Who is telling us today that we are men? Who is in charge of the initiation?
One of the things that said, if you do not do the initiation consciously, you will do it unconsciously, because it'll take place.
Aren't we initiated as men by the sergeant in the army, by the corporate executive that we take our first job from, by the professor at the university?
To some extent. But the sergeant is not the equal of the old male initiators, because he's not interested in your soul.
In your soul?
In your soul. He's interested in your not dying, or he's interested in your physical health, or he's interested in your obedience. But the old male initiators we're talking about, King Arthur would be one, is interested in the soul of the young man. That's what the young men are missing, that there isn't any older men who are interested in their souls.
And you mentioned King Arthur. I mean, he was a mentor to the knights. He was the one who stood at the gate.
Yes, you could say that a beautiful thing. See, one of the ways to think about a male initiation, it goes in this way, possibly. First stage is bonding with the mother and separation from the mother. We do the bonding with the mother pretty well in this country. We don't do the separation well at all. There's no ritual for it. Secondly, bonding with the father and separation from the father. Now, we don't do the bonding with the father well. What did Jeffrey Gore say in The Americans? He said, in order to become American, it's necessary, first of all, to reject your father. That's about all that is necessary. You don't even attack him as in Freud. You disregard him as ridiculous. As in all those movies that we're seeing, in all the film strips and all of the situation comedies in which the fathers are completely ridiculous. You know those?
Sure.
All over television. The father's a fool, and the woman is a wonderful person and knows everything, and the man is in bad shape, and the woman says, you should have Comtrex. And he says, well, what is Comtrex? She tells him what it is. You mean the man doesn't know what Comtrex is? So there is this feeling in which all over situation comedy, the young males writing that are rejecting their fathers over again in order to become real Americans.
Wow, that's really heavy. So one of the things that Bly talks about is he talks about the reason why the relationship between men and boys, or fathers and their sons, has suffered, has to do with the Industrial Revolution. And that there was this bond and this knit between men and their sons. And men weren't always like fathers weren't always the nicest guys, but at least they would teach their sons things to do, right? And once the father got taken out of the home, it was like he talks about how they spent maybe 10 minutes a day with their kids. This is back in the 70s, 80s. So they go off to work, they come home, and nobody knows each other, right? And so and this goes back into Pluto in that third decan. And one of the things that I think can come out of this time that could be very helpful is the fact that jobs as we know them are probably going to go away, which means that men are going to have to figure out how they're going to fucking stay alive. And if you're not interested in being in the beast system, you're going to have to figure out how to stay alive, which means you're going to have to figure out how to do things. If you're not going to be in the beast system, if you don't want some 5G scanner, running your life algorithmically every single moment of your day, then you got to figure out how you're going to be able to live outside of that world. If indeed that world does come about, and it looks like it's hurtling towards us at warp speed. And if that's the case, then perhaps we can reinvent our relationship with our children, so long as we can have them, that we're not sterilized by the free radicals in our carjack. So I think that there's this slight glimmer of hope, because the Industrial Revolution was a bill of goods in a lot of ways. Made a lot of people, made some people fabulously rich. It gave more people at any point in time in history access to wealth in a system that promoted production and consumption. At the end of the day, it has morphed into this technological version of itself, and it's become this Frankenstein monster, which is rapidly becoming both our jail and our jailer simultaneously. We don't get to this place without the Industrial Revolution, right? So this would be the fourth Industrial Revolution, or the Great Reset it's upon us, right? But it's that world of mass production that brought us here. And people were, you go back and you look at, I've talked about this before, is the Industrial Revolution, which people had a great fear of. They knew what was coming around the turn of the century. They knew it was coming, and they didn't want any part of it. Think about how we look at the robot dogs. Okay, we see the robot dogs. We know what RoboDog is about. They had the same feeling when they saw a doppelganger of the robot dog, but in their own way. That's what they saw. And in many regards, they were right, because men did not want to leave their homes. If you had a gig, if you could be a blacksmith, or you could you do any number of things, right? Woodworker, watchmaker, whatever, maybe you're a gunsmith, right? If you could do those things, you didn't have to work for anybody. You had a job, you liked it, you took pride in your work, and your family was around you. Your son was around you. And this is one of the things that Bly talks about. He talks about this transference that takes place when a son is with their father, and that there's a bond. Like there's a bond and there's a confidence that the father is able to imbue upon the son. And I can attest to that as a father, by the way. And I've had those moments, and they're unspoken moments. But there are times when, as a father, and you have a son, they can relax into something bigger or stronger than who they are, right? And it's a natural bond. And Bly talks about this, and by removing the father from the family, the son didn't have that same kind of development. He talks about what happens when our sons get blown out, right? When they get blown out, when there's a void that enters into their life, that's when the demons That's when the demons enter. And I have a clip where he talks about that. And, but you go back and you look at the Industrial Revolution, it was women and children working in factories. Men didn't want to be there. And they had to literally kind of coerce men and do all these different things in order to get them into the workforce. And when they did that, it, in a lot of ways, shattered the atom of the family. I'm not only talking about the nuclear family being, 2 kids, 2 adults, right? That's what we think of it. But the family itself, that this holistic kind of monad of the family. And that by the time we get to the 1950s, it's been obliterated. There's been 2 world wars. You've got people that have been shell-shocked. You've got people who have lost family members. We've gone through a depression, right? So by the time we hit the 50s, and we're just crying out for some kind of return to normalcy, whatever that was, or whatever they were giving us commercially at that time, all of a sudden they turn up the dial on the counterculture, and they get these Pluto and Leo kids. They know who they are. They know where they're coming from. They're into like rock and roll, and they're into rebellion. They're into James Dean. And so they crank up the volume, and they knew they could just see the numbers coming. They could just see all those soldiers coming home and having all those babies. And their eyes were like those cartoons, where the dollars kept rolling around in their eyes, right? Like slot machines. That's what they saw coming. And so they knew that they had to separate their kids out so that they could mine and farm the desires of their own children, that they had to be different than their parents. Because once they were able to hook into that, then they could continue to cultivate them along a product line, which would validate their difference or the differentness from their parents. So that's a whole other topic, right? But that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And the Pluto and Leo kids are into leisure and pleasure. The baby boomers love fun. They love hobbies. They love pastimes. And boy, did they have a plethora of shit ready for them, right? Plethora of it. So that leads us down, this path. And then once they get into that path, they either reject it for a different set of values during the 60s, or they say, fuck it, I want more. And they can even reject it during the 60s and come back out the other side, go human potential. And now you've got, people like Paul Hawken, who, did pretty well for himself for a while. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to do around Bly, but I wanted to bring him up and show you and kind of get into why we are where we are now, because nobody's standing up. Nobody is standing up. We've managed to basically raise at least one generation, possibly 2, with nobody standing up. No, there's no male energy that's moving forward and saying no. And what they've done is they've promoted feminine energy, and they've promoted women, right? They've weaponized the gender gap. They've weaponized that. So now we have a bunch of women who are able to do things in a way that are going to be theoretically less confrontational and less aggressive. So it'll appeal to a group of people who can't deal with confrontation, who can't deal with challenges, who didn't come to the place in the forest where the hand reached out from the pond and dragged the dog in, and the kid said, well, this must be the place. Because we have stopped cultivating that. And it's one of the reasons why we are where we are right now. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. We gave our kids away. We already gave our kids to Molech. We already gave them to Cronus to devour. Whether it was the school system or, we've all been complicit on some level. Now, some of you, there might be some people watching this who saw what was going on and saw the game. and said, I'm not doing that. We're not going to raise our kids that way. You're an anomaly, and you're a good anomaly. And I bet your kids are basically well-adjusted people who get to be well-adjusted in an ever, what's what I'm looking for, an ever more collapsing hellhole. But at least they'll be able to be well-adjusted and be able to make better decisions, hopefully in a time where it's going to be getting harder and harder and harder for individuals to make really sound choices, because the options are becoming narrower and narrower right now. But that's what happened. And Bly really nails a lot of this stuff. And he was talking about it. And it was during a time where if you were paying attention and you had a kid during that time or a little bit thereafter, you could have taken some of this in, but you'd have to be the right person. You know, that's the other thing. You have to be, this is, you know, some of the Moon and Libra stuff. We're getting to the final degrees of Moon and Virgo tonight. You got to find the right person. If you're not, and this is again, a little bit problematic, is that when we've gone into finding partners and finding people to bond with and have children with and create families, some of you have made good choices, and you know, you're reaping the benefits of some of those choices. But I would say more often than not, the choices are not the best, or they're not optimal. And it's not necessarily through any fault of any individual per se. It's because we have been so conditioned and socially engineered, and also dealing with levels of deep trauma and deep toxicity that we inherit from our family lines, that invariably we make choices that are based on fiction or convenience or whatever kind of thing that we assemble and pass for love and respect, and looking into the future and saying, well, this is the person I want to be with the rest of my life, right? And look at the world around us and look what we've created. You know, we've been so moved so far off our center that our children have been impacted. And even if you've done your best to be a good parent and bring good values to your kids, they still have to deal with the fucking world. And they still have to deal with the conditioning and the social engineering and peer pressure. It is really a pressure cooker. Like, this planet has become a pressure cooker. But the one thing that is consistent with Bly is this idea that there is an ancient heartbeat, and that there is something greater than what we have been conditioned and shaped to experience. And I think he conveys that incredibly well. And, you know, he just passed away last week. So why don't we move into Jordan Peterson now? Because Jordan Peterson kind of takes up the mantle, right? He takes there hadn't been a person like Robert Bly around until Jordan Peterson shows up. And he's a very different kind of yoga, very different. So what I want to do is I want to show you Jordan Peterson's human design chart, because it's really fascinating. And, you know, Jordan Peterson is he's a Gemini with a Taurus rising. So let's go find him. And you know, when I look at Peterson and Bly and both their human design charts, it's like, it totally vets human design. There's a there. So here's Jordan Peterson. He is a manifester, right? So he's got some fucking juice. And he does. I mean, the Jordan Peterson, first of all, I think he knows who he is for the most part. He is a Gemini. He is a Gemini. So there's parts of him he's still figuring out. But I think for the most part, he knows who he is. And he's been able to really capitalize on that self-knowledge. So as a manifester, he can get a lot of shit done. Now, he's an emotional manifester. And if you go, both he and Bly are emotional. Bly is a projector. So he's going to basically fill the room with what's in the room. Peterson doesn't need this. Peterson is, even though he doesn't have his own center, but manifestors and projectors are similar in that way. Manifestors are much more will-oriented in their approach. So he's a 5-1, so he's a heretical investigator, which completely describes Jordan Peterson. He's going to be heretical because he's going to bring up points of view that are not politically correct. And when you want to adopt him as, like, say, a symbol of, oh, I don't know, the conservative movement or the right or truth, he'll go in the other direction. He'll spin. He'll be a heretic unto that as well. Right. So he's being a Gemini. He is really, truly a heretic. And the investigator is that he's always going to be guided in that Gemini way by his curiosity. And he'll look at what? Lobsters. Like he'll look at the hierarchies of lobsters and shit like that. That's an investigator. Now, what's really interesting here is that his left angle of the cross is confrontation 1. And that's really interesting. Like, he's a guy that's basically here to confront people, right? He is here, and Bly's not here to do that. Bly's here to love. Jordan Peterson is here to, like, put on the gloves and go duke it out. And this is actually a very powerful left angle of the cross. And it has a lot to do with high level kind of corporate hierarchies and position and power and trends. It's very interesting. And his strategy is to inform and initiate, which is what manifestors do. And the theme in his life is peace and anger. So we can see some of these things here. Both him and Bly, mountains were their environment. So his personality is strategic, totally true. His motivation is hope. I think so. His sense is uncertainty. I could see that adding into his nervous nature. This is what I think is interesting here, is his trajectory is theist. I'm an anti-theist. So Jordan Peterson talks a lot about God. He does a whole thing on Christianity. He's very into Judaism, right? I'm an anti-theist. Doesn't mean I'm anti-God, but it's different. View perspective is peripheral. View probability. Transfer motivation is guilt. And transfer view is possibility. So his channels are 1333, the prodigal, 1762, acceptance, 2644, surrender, 3536, transitoriness. So he really, to me, fits this mold of the 5-1 heretical investigator, emotional manifestor with the left angle of the cross. Let me see if I can find that. Let me see if I can find that so you guys can see it. So that these incarnation crosses in human design. And let's find this one. So what is an incarnation cross? It is the path or storyline that you are designed to live out during your life. It is not an inevitable fate. You can choose to not live that path, but most of the time we can't help but express our cross, at least partially, because it's what comes naturally to us. If life were a theatrical play, your type would be the role you play in that production. For example, the butler might be a role in a play. Your role in this life is your type, manifestor generator, manifesting generator projector, or reflector, which means you are here to initiate, work, guide, or reflect, depending on your type. So manifestors initiate, generators work, manifesting generators work, projectors guide, and reflectors reflect. So your profile is the personality or character you bring to your role. In the case of the butler, some butlers are quiet, some are stern, some are incompetent, usually in comedy, some are smarter than their employer, Jeeves, some protect their employer, Batman's Alfred. There are many ways to play a butler. The incarnation cross is the plot line or storyline that the character, their role plays out. So your incarnation cross can be thought of as your broad purpose in life, made a little more specific by your type and profile, and further refined by the rest of the gate energies you carry source. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read you Jordan Peterson's. This is an interesting one. Okay. So here's his. I'll show you. Right here. Left angle of the cross of confrontation. This is energy to come from the outside and take control of what is rightfully yours. In society and business, there will always be management or control that gets stagnant over time. This cross is here to shake things up, usually from the outside, like a corporate raider who comes in to optimize the pieces of a large business. And this is what Peterson does. He's a consultant. He does this for a fucking living. This is energy to take control and to lead a more streamlined and profitable configuration. This is not just about government or business. This force will take hold in your personality, your personal life, or community. The real drive here is power and control. And I think Jordan Peterson does that. I think he is always in control. He's always in control. And he is, and I have some issues with him. Not that he gives a fuck, but you cannot deny that he has a presence and he has a strength and determination and a power about him. You don't get 2 best-selling books, and you don't get to fly around the world and do all of these speaking engagements and tours, have to debate and take on your critics and do it in a way that is rather formidable. Like after a while, I don't know if a lot of people wanted to take Jordan Peterson on in a debate. He slayed a lot of people. So but the downside with Jordan Peterson, it's really interesting because he made a choice to get the carjack. And then he started like capping on other people. He was one of those people. He was one of those people who just couldn't do it. He had to belittle other people to just go ahead and do it, right? He turned it into a make your bed kind of moment. And I think he's kind of paying for that now. And those are some of the areas in Jordan Peterson's life where he has a bit of a blind spot. And he said he did it because he travels and he talks and he needs to do that in order to do that. Well, that's convenience. That's convenience. And he can rationalize that away all he wants. But if he got the real carjack, then he's in a lot bigger trouble than maybe even when he was addicted to benzos, which is an older story. But I think a lot of his work is valid. And I think he's the only guy that comes around and makes a difference in a way that Robert Bly did, but from a different perspective. I want to play something. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm going to play something and I'm going to riff on it a little bit because it really it put a crack in the prison wall, not my prison wall, but I can see put a crack in the prison wall. So let me see if I can find it here. Let's see how long is this?
No, until you failed so bad.
This is it. Okay. By the way, I'm going to put this in the chat because it's, I think it's really worth listening to. And if you have like a young person in your life, I'm going to play this. Not quite. Hey, Seeger, it's good to see you. Hold on a second. Oh, that's the wrong one. Where am I? Hold on. Shit. All right, let me do this. Hold on a second. All right, I got to skip this. I'm just going to play it for you guys. I'm just going to play it right here. Give me 1 second. All right. You can see it here. Hold on. Yeah, the JQ thing, that's a whole other show. So turn yourself into a person that can face anything in life. This is actually pretty good. Pretty good. I'm going to play you 2 clips here. I'm just going to go through. And you can tell that, like, in human design, right, he's emotional, right? He's driven by his emotion. And that really comes through in this one piece right here. Let's see if I can play this.
Does nothing but reject it. And that's a good guideline to life in general. So pull back.
Really sad to see that people are disenchanted and nihilistic and depressed and anxious and homeless and perverse and vengeful and all of those things. It's terrible. And then to see people question whether that's necessary and then to start to rise out of it. It's like, it's so fun. Like last night I was after my talk, it's overwhelming. I don't usually think about these things, but I was after my talk last night, and so all these people line up, and they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and attentive when they come up to talk to me, and then they have 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them, and they're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I'll think, oh, that's so good. Somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I hadn't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual is an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around them. It's a chain reaction, and so it's a lovely thing to see.
That's the emotional manifestor right there. You saw it.
If you're hungry and you eat, well, that's good, but it's over, and then you're on to the next thing, right? It's not exactly sustaining, it's just necessary. That's called consummatory reward, by the way. This other reward system is incentive reward, and the incentive reward system works on dopamine, this neurochemical dopamine, which is also the neurochemical tracks that opiates and cocaine and amphetamines, the drugs that people really like to abuse, alcohol often for some people, activate. And so you might say if you don't have enough meaning in your life, then you're more prone to addiction. And that's definitely the case, even with rats. If you take a rat and you put him in a cage by himself and he has nothing to do, and then you give him access to cocaine, he'll get addicted to the point where he won't do anything but take cocaine. But if you throw the rat back in with a bunch of other rats and he gets to do rat things, then it's very hard to get him addicted to cocaine. And so the purposeless rat is prone to addiction. Well, it's the same with human beings. Now, here's a corollary to that, which is really cool. So the magnitude of the reward you experience as you're moving towards a goal is proportionate to the importance of the goal. So that means the more important the goal you pick, the more possibility there is for the kind of reward, let's say.
All right, that's cool, but that's not really what I wanted to share. There's a part here where he's talking about being on the playground. And it's a really, I think, it was a really important piece of information that put everything into perspective for me. Just so I can find it here. Yeah. Here we go. This is it.
Here's an example. Let's say that you're having a rough patch in your relationship and you don't know why. It's unnameable. Is it real? Well, yeah, it's manifesting itself in like a physiological discomfort. Then you talk about it and you name it. It's like it goes from this blurry thing that's kind of potential, it goes snap, and then it's this thing, right? And then that's a horrible thing. It's like a little poisonous thing, but it's not a whole foggy cloud of potential poison. It's like this little sharp poison thing. And then you think, okay, it's real. It's a little monster, but it's not, it's little at least, and now probably we can do something about it if we can admit to it.
There is no faith and no courage and no sacrifice in doing what is expedient. What do you say to those viewers that don't pursue their dreams?
So, all right, I'm getting off the path a little bit here. I apologize. Let me see if I can just summarize it. He talks about being on a playground. And you're on a playground and you know that there are some kids hassling you. And you know you should do something about it. But you don't. What you do is you go off and you tell your mother. And then that sets up this cycle where you go to authority. He talks about this. And I thought to myself, well, this is a really important kind of moment in our development, and it gets into where we are now. There's a reason why I'm bringing this up. And once you do that, you begin to cede more and more authority all the time until you get to where we are now, and everybody's ceding their authority because why? They feel vulnerable. They felt vulnerable on the playground. They went to an adult and then they said, help, I need help. But they couldn't handle it themselves. So now you've got a bunch of people now who are vulnerable. They're vulnerable because there's this monstrous thing that is roaming around our environment and atmosphere, just waiting to jump into your body and then send you onto an incubator. Right? I mean, they're vulnerable in their minds. They're vulnerable because of this, or they're vulnerable because their job and their livelihood is now being determined by how much they'll participate in listening to what authority will say to them as a result of this. Right? Because authority is telling them, if you want to continue to do what you're doing, then you have to do these things. And a lot of people feel vulnerable around that, or just vulnerable in general around, being able to bring home the bacon or the groceries or whatever those things are. So we've set up people in our culture. And this is a big part of what Bly is talking about. Right, where this family axis has been obliterated, both parents. He gives mothers more credit for having stronger relationships with their daughters because more of them they're around each other a bit more. And I think he might have some truth to that. But we've set this thing up in a way where it's become this ground zero of chaos and alienation, and more importantly, vulnerability, although we tend to mask things to the best of our ability when we are vulnerable, whatever they are, fashion trends, material things, goods getting obliterated, whatever those things are. But at the core, people are still vulnerable. So now we enter into this big period of vulnerability. And people have checked that authority box, right? They've checked that Saturnian box, because that's what life on this planet is defined by. It's defined by Saturn. It's not really defined by Jupiter, which is about potential and possibility, and about being able to expand beyond one's perceived limitations. Now, this world is defined by Saturn. So we have people that will buy into, they'll say yes to the authority because they're vulnerable. That's why. So you as an individual might have the ability to tell somebody that if you do X, Y, and Z, that this is probably what's going to happen to you. And you can quote chapter and verse, and you can essentially lay this thing out in such a way that any real, clear thinking and analytic person would completely understand what you were saying. And based on what you were saying, they may think twice about what they're about to do. Am I right? Because if you really break it down and look at these things, it would make a lot of sense. But you'll get the pushback because people don't want you to become their authority. And you know why? Because you don't have the same power as the authority. They're not going to give you that. You don't have the same power. Now, I'll throw a little twist on it. Let's say you were worth $20 million. And you came in and that's what you said. You know what? They might act, I hate to say it, but they might listen to you. You know why? Because they would not feel as vulnerable. If they knew you and you were in their life and you had $20 million and you came in with all these facts and figures and you were able to lay out what could happen if you participated in X, Y, and Z, there's a good chance they may listen to you. I hate to say it, but it's true. Because you have to wonder why somebody like Bill Gates, who's a total fucking scumbag and a heel, you have to wonder why he can do what he does. Because he has resources, and we have completely reaffirmed into people's heads that he's the richest man in the world, or third richest man. Well, whoever they decide is going to be the richest, motherfucker in the world for that week. Whether it's him or Bezos or who knows, right? So now people are thinking, oh, wow, he's got all this money. And then he does all these things theoretically for the world. Oh, he cares so much about the people in Africa and India that he's really invested in their health, and he's going to create vaccines for them. He's an authority. People will accede to his authority. This is what happens. They've been programmed. And when people are vulnerable and they've already given up, people have already given up their autonomy and their ability to be sovereign by looking to authorities to solve their problems, i.e. their mother or father or whomever else, right? Then it's a done deal. It's a done deal. And the only way these people who are bound in this hypnotic spell can get out of the spell is if they can somehow get back in touch with their own authority. And that's a very hard thing to do once you've squandered it away, once you've let it go, once you've given it up for the price of what? Security. People are vulnerable and they'll check that security box most of the time. It's hard. It's hard to make choices when you are and be autonomous when you're vulnerable. It's just the way the human condition is. But it became very, very clear. And the new world that is coming, when we'll bring it back to astrology, the new world that is coming, where we have this marriage between Jupiter and Saturn together, right? 0 Aquarius on the 21st of December of last year. That was the template for the new time. And there is going to be people who will be a part of the new world. And I'm not talking about the WEF version of it, that they will be people that will not be invested in authority. This is how it's going to work. There will be people that will not be invested in authority. Now, there will probably be parallel worlds, and there will be a group of people who have invested in authority. This is how this thing is going to unfold. And don't ever underestimate the power of people who do not invest in authority. People that invest in autonomy and sovereignty and freedom and truth, because they have freedom and truth on their sides. And this is the greatest power. This is the greatest power. We're in Sagittarius, so we can talk about this. This is the greatest power they can have. You ever wonder why the Afghanis were able to stave off the Americans and the Russians? Two very long-standing wars. They had truth and freedom on their side, even though, especially the first time versus the Russians. You ever wonder why the North Viet Cong were able to defeat the Americans? Yeah, there were rules of engagement and made things a lot more difficult for Americans. We were the invaders. Sorry. We were the invaders. And when that happens, and you've got some kind of moral authority, not outer authority, but moral authority, which is inner authority, you have the greatest odds on your side. That's how it works. That's how it works. And we get tested with this all the time. And this gets back to what Bly is talking about with the warrior, that we have to develop this ability to sacrifice ourselves for something that's transcendent. And I think when you think of it along those terms, then your path in life becomes more meaningful. It becomes based on something that is going to get you through the hardest and darkest times. If you are really committed to that path, you will get through it. You know, I watched Joe Rogan today for a little bit, and it was just a YouTube thing. And he was interviewing Jewel, who I thought was actually really interesting. And she had a great story. And she talked about when she was in San Diego, when she was trying to get discovered. She was living in her car and she was shoplifting in San Diego. So she sang when she was young. She thought, well, maybe I could get a job singing. I could get paid for that. Well, when she started out in San Diego, there all these record labels were coming down to San Diego to sign bands like Rat and a bunch of other groups. And so Jewel, clubs were charging people to perform. They were charging people to perform. And she said, fuck that, I need to make money. And she wound up going down, I think it was, I forget where it was. I could see it in my head. I used to live in San Diego. Anyway, she wound up hanging out in this one park, and she would go to this tree in this one park and hang out and try to figure her shit out, right? She had no money. And there was a coffee shop that was going to go out of business in 2 months. Nobody went there. And she went over to that coffee shop and she said, look, can you stay open for at least another 3 months? And she said, well, why? The woman said, why? Because I want to sing here. And I want to, I want to make some money singing, but I'd also like to help you out, bring you maybe some customers. So the woman agreed to it. And then Jewel started to go out and sing, like in the park, on the beach. And she had a flyer. And she said, I'll be at this coffee place on Thursday night. And she said the first night she did it, 2 guys showed up. And they thought she was cute. They were surfer guys. They showed up. Next week there was 4. The next week there was like 10 or 8 or something. And 2 months later, there were lines out the door to watch her sing. And there was a bidding war that was going on for her with the record companies. And she went on this thing where she was getting flown all over the place. And she made some very clear decisions. This is very interesting. She's a Gemini, by the way, May 23rd. She made some very clear decisions. One was that she wanted to have fun. And she wanted to be an artist. Right? So those things were really important to her. She needed to enjoy what she was doing, and she wanted to be an artist. Everything else would sort itself out. And she was ordered $1 million advance, and she got a book from the library about the record industry. So she taught herself some shit, right? And she realized that the advance was a loan. And if she took that money, that she would feel her creative process would feel burdened. And she would have to create in order to be commercial, in order to pay that back. She didn't want that. So she took no money, but she had a big fat back end of her deal. And she became a huge fucking hit. And she made a ton of money. And the reason I'm bringing this story up is because it's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, she was vulnerable, and she could have done any number of things for being able to survive. Like, she could have found some kind of authority. I'll get a job. I'll go get a job. I'll go somewhere and I'll go work, and I'll take care of my problem. She didn't do that. She lived in her car. She toughed it out a little bit, and she got creative. She never let go of that principle. And I don't know where she got that from. She never let go of that principle. And that principle carried her across this threshold. And she began to self-actualize, and she could feel the self-actualization coming. Now, again, these are different times. This is where we had more options. This is where there was a tomorrow. And we're not sure now that there is a tomorrow, at least based on the narrative. But that's what she decided upon. So as we move into this eclipse energy, we move into this Sagittarian eclipse energy, where we deal with things like beliefs, deal with things like truth, where we deal with things like being authentic and autonomous and sovereign. These are all elements of Sagittarius that I associate with Sagittarius, the best parts of Sagittarius. That this eclipse time can reveal to us where we're not doing that, where we are not in alignment, where we are not being engaged in a truthful expression of who we are. And if our truthful expression of who we are has to do with sovereignty and autonomy and not submitting to authority, then it will come through. It will come through, and we will be able to magnetize those qualities to us if we can see that we are not in alignment with those qualities. So it's an important eclipse. And if you do it right, Jasper, if you do it right, it'll help you get through where we're going. This is important. Just remember this, okay? It's important. And you have to commit to it. You have to commit to the fact that you may go through a period of time where you may not be safe. You may not feel safe. You may feel vulnerable. You may want to punch that ticket, to Authority Central. But if you could hold out and stay like in the moment and do your best to understand that you have options, because you still have options, then that will make you stronger. And I'll tell you why it's even more important now than it was when Jewel was kind of navigating that moment and did a terrific job, splendid job. I don't think she's lying, by the way. She also made a commitment to tell the truth. That was interesting. She didn't want to sing about anything that wasn't the truth in her life. I thought that was great. Anyway, the reason why it's important is because the stakes are so much higher now. They're so much higher. So that when you are able to do something like that, when you're able to affirm and decree that that's who you are, and that there are forces greater than yourself that will participate with you through some of these difficult times, the payoff is tremendous. Think of it as like the ultimate shit coin in terms of belief. The payoff is tremendous. Like that's your Bitcoin. If you can stay with that, that's your Bitcoin. And you may, who knows how it'll manifest? You may have to be homeless. You may have to get in your car, go drive somewhere and see, I don't like where I live. It's too restrictive. I need to be somewhere else where it's less restrictive. And I may have just a few dollars and a few gallons of gas in my car. But what I do know is that I cannot be in a place where I will not be authentic and sovereign. And if you start from that place, then that will be a motivating factor for you to go to that place where you'll be able to breathe and you'll be able to make some adjustments in your life. I've done it more than once. Trust me. I seem to land on my feet sometimes. In some of the periods, a little bit messier than others, but it can be done. And I'm encouraging you, if you're having issues around that, just stop the voices in your head and just commit to that path. You commit to that path will commit to you. You have to stay open. That's important. We're in Chiron and Aries. We have to go into this period now with Chiron and Aries, and we have to test our humanity, and we have to see what we're made of here. And when Neptune and Saturn conjunct together in Aries, we're getting primed for that time. You want to be ready for that time, because that's really when the worlds separate. When Saturn and Neptune come together in Aries, that's when they separate. And you'll either be part of a system where you're pioneering and you're doing something that is going to be intrinsic and valuable, and you'll get to find out who you are, or you'll be in another system where it'll be the exact opposite of that. Trust me. So you got to get prepared for it now. All right, let's take a quick look at the eclipse itself and see what we got going on here. So let's just bring it right up here and check it out. Actually, I want to do something different. I want to put the US chart on there because that was my intent. And it'll be easier, I think. Okay. So I am using the July 4th Ebenezer Sibley chart. He was an odd character. So this is the good old USA right here. The Cancerian sun, Mercury in Cancer, true node in Leo. That really fits for this country. We have Mars and Gemini, right? You guys know the drill here. Saturn and Libra, 10th house. There's that work ethic, right? The 10th house. I like Saturn and Libra in the 10th house. It's a good place for it. Neptune and Virgo. We've been in this Neptune opposition, haven't we? Right there. See that? Man, that's a tough one. That's a tough opposition. Boy, oh boy. Everything is dissolving. And we're dealing with all the Virgo health stuff. Virgo health. We got Neptune and Pisces and what's real, what's not real. Who's got the right answers, right? Who's the authority? Ball of confusion. That's what that is. And not easy. It's a unsolid ground, man. Unsolid ground. But you can see here as Neptune gets closer and closer to that IC, a flood is coming. A flood is coming. Right, so that IC is what 1 Aries. That's the Saturn-Neptune conjunction right there. So here we go. Let's talk eclipse. It's right on the United States ascendant. Bang on. So if we look at the idea of the United States ascendant, how the country unfolds, it's about expansion. Expansion. Even though that's the eastern part of the chart, it's still about expansion. And this country has seriously expanded itself so far that, you know, most of our products are made in other places, which is very Sagittarian, by the way. But this cycle is coming to an end. We already saw it when Saturn in Sagittarius began to transit across the ascendant, the U.S. ascendant. That's when Obama was president, by the way. But here, this the identity, the persona of it, kind of expansion and adventure and philosophy and goodwill. I mean, all these things that are associated with the United States, the myth of the United States. And some of those things are true. And some of those things are part of the myth. The sun is eclipsing the ascendant here, which feels very fatalistic. And I don't usually use that term with astrology, by the way. I don't believe in fate. I'm much more of a proponent of destiny, which is a very different thing. But it does seem rather fated. Not fatalist, fated. And there's a darkness. Now, this is not a full solar eclipse, but it's a darkness that comes over the ascendant. I think the eclipse is mostly in Antarctica, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like it's coming straight across the country, but it is there right on the ascendant. So we are going to see something and learn something and understand something about this country and us as a people that I think is going to be, let's say it's going to test us. It'll test us. And they're already talking in this eclipse window that the end is near, that all of these great dynasties come to an end, whether it's Rome or Greece or Tartaria or whatever. They're already talking about that. And this eclipse moment sort of leans into that. You know, the eclipse on the ascendant sort of leans into that. And you have to be aware that these people are very skilled dark magicians. They're very good at creating the appearance of certain things, whether it's the appearance of a catastrophic disease or a catastrophic shortage of goods and services and people, or a catastrophic shortage of fuel in order to run things on. They're very good at creating these conditions that aren't really true. So we have to understand that when we come upon a moment like this, that that the projector, I'm not talking projector in human design, but the projector of the movie is going to be showing a very different movie. And I keep thinking about the status of Washington, D.C. I think it's ticking. I think it is a controlled demolition waiting to happen. I feel like they've shut a lot of the buildings down. Like I think the IRS has moved to Nevada. Like this is significant. I feel like that they've shut a lot of this down because they are essentially hardwiring a controlled demolition here. That's my sense. And this will be the thing. This will be the thing that will push everybody into the arms of authority. Some people will dance for joy. They'll be like Helena Bonham Carter and Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Just watching it all go down. But I guarantee you the majority of America will not. And I don't know how much longer we have before that happens. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. Because in order for this new paradigm to come in, the old one has to completely be destroyed. And I'm not talking about just removing a few statues from people you've never heard of. Or maybe you've heard of them, but may not think they're all that relevant. I'm talking about a complete ground level demolition, controlled demolition. We're already seeing it with the economy. We're already seeing it with other parts of our society, public school, news, media. It's all happening. It's all happening simultaneously. And the only thing that needs to happen as a result is the physical manifestation of that. So let's just hope and pray that that it doesn't happen, because fuck these people. But if it does happen, then you need to be aware of it, and you need to be prepared for that, and you need to commit to something that is transcendent, the thing that is going to live on beyond this time that we're in. You have to commit to that. That is the thing that will get you through. You have to do everything in your power in order to be engaged and activated so that you can get there and you can bring people that you love. There's no guarantee that you will, by the way. But your odds are a lot better if you do. A lot better. I do not like Mars in the 12th house here. Not at all. Not at all. That's hidden enemies. That's aggression and violence behind the scenes. And Mars is just moving into the U.S. 12th house. You see it right there. Right? This is on Friday. This is on Friday. So it's right there right now. Just ingressing. And then we're going to go through this Mars opposition once it goes into Sagittarius. That's not going to be until after the first of the year. But nonetheless, those are big, big transits, especially coming off of this. Right? So just commit here. Just commit. Just let the eclipse guide you to see where your blind spots are. And then adjust your sails accordingly so you don't get caught with those blind spots during this next eclipse cycle in 2022. It'll be instructive, but it'll be good. You'll learn a lot. That's the thing about Sagittarius. You get to learn about shit. That's how it's supposed to work. All right. I'm out of here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being such a swell group of people. No one you know got a job offer from NOAA last year while unemployed. Would have had to move to DC, so I declined. Good job, man. Way to go. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Yep. Let's see. Maybe that's why Biden spends all of his time in Delaware. Yep. It's going to be a nuclear bomb. I had dreams about it 30 years ago. I wouldn't be surprised. So Ms. Matrix is going to, but that's a bold move, California. All right. Good on you. Okay. Movie. See, I saw that. Yeah, it's a weird movie. It's like an Italian sci-fi comedy. Totally weird shit. CIA moved to Colorado. I wouldn't be surprised. They want to be on higher ground. Think about that. They want to be on higher ground. I think that says something. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to so what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thank you for being here. All right. Let me give you a quick heads up. I'm going to put this up either tonight or tomorrow. I had to get ready for tonight's show, but Masaki Miyagawa and myself are doing a crypto webinar. You're going to want to be a part of it because we got so much good feedback on the last show that we did. I think it was 3 weeks ago, but this is going to be a little bit different. So it's a 2-part webinar. It's going to be Saturday, Sunday, 11th and 12th of December. And it's going to be soup to nuts. Saturday, we're going to take you through everything you need to know from start to finish. You're going to get hooked up with a nano ledger. We're going to show you how to set that up. We're going to get into what a blockchain is. So if you are new to crypto world, you want to be a part of this webinar. Okay. That's on Saturday. Sunday, it's going to be 2 hours, and we go into the future of cryptocurrency, synthetic assets, digital farming. So we're going to get into kind of where things are headed. So we're going to get you up and running and get you into the basics so you know what the playing field is to the best of our ability within 3 hours. Sunday, we take you into the future. So I'm going to put a link here either tonight or tomorrow. It'll be on my website. There'll be a link on this broadcast on YouTube. I'll have a link on the 15 Minutes of Flame site, and I'll have a link on my Facebook page as well. So if you're on Masaki's email list, he'll let you know. Also, and I'm hoping to do this I'll try to do at least one by the end of the year, one more webinar. This will be an astrological webinar for the end of the year. And if you're part of the people that donate to this, you can go. You'll be able to show up. If you're not a member and you want to pay for it, you can. That's fine too. And I'm going to do hopefully another webinar just right after the first of the year. Everything's kind of getting compressed. And I'll be doing a webinar on the Sabian symbols after the first of the year. Before the first of the year, so this is going to be the 18th, the weekend of the 18th. It'll be the astrology of 2022 and some other stuff. Okay, so you got those things to look forward to. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Catch me on 15 Minutes of Flame tomorrow. Take care and bye for now.